off by saying there's of course no wrong way to play a video game. That said, there's certainly ways of playing video games that make them way better. This is a list of all the ways you can one-up your experience with certain video games. Whether it's getting a more authentic experience with a game, ripping out that HUD so you can be more immersed in the game world, or trying a post-release version way less people played that vastly improves the game. Most of you probably wouldn't have played these games the way we're suggesting, but we recommend you give it a shot. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 9 video games everyone played wrong. Number 9. Metro Exodus. The world of Metro is harsh and unforgiving, and has been since Metro 2033 landed on PC and Xbox 360 in 2010. If you're up for it, 2019's Metro Exodus can be played in a way that makes it just as oppressive. Metro Exodus is bleak as heck, forcing you to cope with a harsh, radiation-riddled environment, challenging combat encounters, and difficult moral dilemmas. I mean, this is the post-apocalypse after all, but it's not your daddy's post-apocalypse with the cute vault suits and the funny talking robots. Nope. This is basically hell on earth. That goes double if you're playing in the game's hardest mode, Ranger Hardcore. This lets you eliminate the game's HUD, bumps up the enemy AI intelligence, and makes resources super scarce. So yeah, it's a nightmare if you're not a fan of difficulty in games, but it really fits the atmosphere and context of the game. There's nothing quite like actually fighting for survival in a game world that's extremely threatening. Some of the essential HUD info can be seen on your wrist, so you're not totally in the dark. If you want to up the immersion ante, you can go ahead and play in Russian as well. If you don't speak Russian, well, congratulations, you just made Ranger Hardcore even more hardcore. Number 8. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is the perfect entry for this list because it's not just about playing it on a hard difficulty so you can have bragging rights. There's entire gameplay systems and features that become easy to ignore if you don't. This is a good spot to point out that of course difficulty is relative and accessibility is important. That said, there are things that you'll miss out on if your skill level is higher than the difficulty that you chose to play on. In The Witcher 3, that's the entire alchemy system that encompasses potions, oils, bombs, and your incredibly dense suite of items that can give you vital buffs, and should be as integral to the combat experience as casting magical signs. I say should be because if you're playing on a lower difficulty, you probably won't need any of this to get by. You might pop a swallow potion to buff your health or slap some enemy-relevant oil on your sword to do extra damage in a boss battle, but largely you'll get away with setting the system aside, especially if you're a completionist like me and often find yourself overleveled for quests anyway. Instead, playing on Deathmarch with no HUD is absolutely game-changing. You'll have this new required tactical element to approaching battles, and the immersion is so much better. Having just wrapped on this one after 190 odd hours playing on normal, I definitely missed out on the need to optimize my build or learn the best alchemical tactics for big fights. If you're feeling confident, go on in and up the difficulty to play the game in an entirely new way. Number 7. Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium is a spectacular 2019 RPG from Zaum that I absolutely will not stop talking about, but it's relevant here, so give me this one, okay? While the version that released at launch had some voice acting, it was very minimal, which is a bit of a shame because the voiced parts were really good. And to say this game has a lot of reading in it is truly underselling the sheer amount of reading. It's fortunate then that the final cut, which released in 2021, includes full voice acting and new content. This is pretty universally agreed upon as the best way to play the game, and it elevates the already fantastic narrative to new heights. Of course, not many people played it this way, unfortunately, because even though it was a free upgrade for PC players, it didn't come out until 2 years after the original release. It's a massive shame as the update basically takes a game that was, in this humble writer's opinion, a total 10 out of 10 and makes it even better. Aside from that, as the majority of the game is written in descriptive narration, you're now having all that read to you in dulcet tones, so the game feels more like a classic tabletop RPG than it ever did before. So do me and yourself a favor, and if you haven't played Disco Elysium, especially if you were put off by all the reading, make a beeline for the final cut. Number 6. Ninja Gaiden 3. Team Ninja's Ninja Gaiden 3 arrived to a pretty chilly reception back in 2012. The action-adventure game was criticized for being too streamlined and failing to deliver on its big promises. Some outlets went as far as to call it shallow and lacking in the challenge and depth of its predecessors, while one just called it a technical disaster. Suffice it to say, this one wasn't making it on the company Christmas card. but a redemption story would unfold 2 years later. Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge was an updated and expanded version of the game, which was initially released exclusively on the Wii U, before being ported to the PS3 and Xbox 360 the following year. This edition made massive strides on the technical side and far more accurately represents the game it appeared Team Ninja had wanted Ninja Gaiden 3 to be in the first place. This edition made massive strides on the technical side and far more accurately represents the game that it appeared Team Ninja had wanted Ninja Gaiden 3 to be in the first place. While it may have seemed like a nice apology to fans, and many received it as such, more never played it as the Wii U was barely getting off the ground and never did strike a chord with gamers. As a result, no one really gave Razor's Edge the time of day and likely didn't realize just how much it had improved on the base game. In short, if you only played the initial release of this one, you missed out on what the game was intended to be. Number 5. Fire Emblem Three Houses. I know we're towing a line here and telling you how to play your games and that sometimes you should seriously consider making them harder on yourself, but if you're playing Fire Emblem Three Houses, turn permadeath on. Turn it on. Just turn it on. The mode with permadeath is called Classic Mode. It's a staple of the franchise. It's the way the game is supposed to be played. Don't be baby. Turn it on. Now, I can say this without seeming like a total strategy game fan elitist because the game isn't ruthless with its permadeath mechanic. You'll still be able to restart maps if you totally screw up. You can use the Divine Pulse mechanic, which lets you redo turns a set number of times in battle if you do something silly and get someone killed. And most importantly, you can still pick your difficulty level while having permadeath turned on. Permadeath was mandatory in the franchise until the release of New Mystery of the Emblem for the DS in 2010, and there's a good reason for it. The story of Three Houses is fantastic, and you'll form pretty complex and interesting relationships with your students and colleagues as you go through the game, so it's really important to have actual high stakes in battle. There's enough buffer mechanics that you should be fine not losing anybody if you really don't want to. Unless you think a fight at the very beginning is just a practice fight, so you think nothing of it when you lose Dorothea, and then you think extra nothing of it when you see her back at the monastery and it's only several hours later when you're headed to your next skirmish and realize you can't include her, so she must have been critically injured in that first fight and you won't be able to use her for the rest of your 100-hour playthrough, but you're not going to play through that 5 hours all over again. That may or may not be based on personal experience. Number 4. Hellblade Sacrifice Sacrifice. This is probably going to be one of the least controversial entries on this list because there absolutely is a right way of playing Hellblade Sacrifice, and that way is with headphones. If you kick back in your living room or bedroom or wherever your gaming platform of choice lives with your speakers on blast to boot up this psychological action-adventure masterpiece, you messed up. The game's still going to be great, but you are going to miss out on one really big, cool thing that this game does which most games don't. For the uninitiated, Hellblade protagonist Senua is going through it, to put it lightly. She's on a journey to Helheim to rescue the soul of her dead lover, and she experiences near constant episodes of psychosis that manifest in various ways. One of these is voices in her head that comment on the things she's doing, things she's done, and things she set out to do. Sometimes they're supportive, sometimes angry, insulting, or distressed. Ninja Theory did a ton of research to get this representation of Senua's psychoses accurate to real-world experiences, and if you pop on headphones, you'll be right in the middle of it. Binaural recording was used to properly replicate the 3D position of sound, and real people who hear voices were brought in to sign off on the result. It's really special and unique, and while it does make an already somewhat disconcerting experience even more so, it's super important to play it this way, and it's much more cool. Number 3. The Sims 4. From one of the least controversial entries on this list to probably the most controversial and personal, there is a right way to play The Sims, and almost no one is doing it this way. In the more recent iterations of The Sims, you have life goals, more subtasks to complete than ever, whether it's related to your little Sim's career or love life or friendships, and controversial opinion, there's no reason to be doing anything other than what those tickable boxes tell you to do. I know, I'm a crazy person, but I don't care. If I'm playing The Sims and my Sim wants to get to the top of their career ladder, then they will be doing just that on max speed with nothing else distracting them. No friends, no family, no nothing. Is this a nuts way to play a game that almost everyone else in the world sees as a limitless playground for dressing up digital dolls, building houses, and playing around with all that the game can offer? Probably. But it's the way I've been playing it for years, and Max has put the systems in there for people like me who decided The Sims 4 is actually an RPG to be mastered, so let's blame them. Number 2. Persona 5. This is an odd inclusion because I'm technically talking about two different games, but we kinda did that with Ninja Gaiden 3, and I think in this case the games are similar enough to qualify. In short, if you only play Persona 5 and you didn't play Persona 5 Royal, the extended and wildly improved version, you haven't played the best version of the game. The ending cutscene of Persona 5 is much nicer, but literally everything else that makes up Persona 5 Royal is better. The mechanics are refined and improved, the new content with the 2 brand new confidants is one of the best stories video games have ever told, and an old favorite character features far more prominently. That's just the tip of the iceberg of the improvements, but you'd be forgiven for playing this one wrong, as P5 alone probably swallowed 100 odd hours of your life, and not a lot of people are gonna want to play all that again for more content and gameplay mechanics. But you should, because it's better. It's so much better. And if you haven't played either, then you're lucky. Just go play Persona 5 Royal instead. Number 1, Ghost of Tsushima. Sucker Punch released the gorgeous action-adventure Ghost of Tsushima in 2020. It was a massive hit with critics and audiences alike due to its strikingly beautiful environments, flowing combat, and lovely homage to Kurosawa films. If you found yourself breezing through this one or you're up for a challenge, then the best way of playing this game could be for you. To pull this one off, you will have had to wait a couple weeks after the game released, which is when Sucker Punch added Lethal Difficulty. Lethal Difficulty makes combat extremely immersive and challenging without just making things harder. That's because its effects don't just apply to you, it applies to your enemies. A well-placed single sword strike can be deadly no matter who is dealt it, which is a really clever way of making things more challenging without defaulting to turning everything into a hit sponge. This mode will make you master your counters and parrying, which makes your combat fluidity and wins a lot more satisfying. There's one more thing you should absolutely do to play this game in what we're calling the right way, and that's to play it in Japanese. Doing this with the original version was possible, but it was a bit of a headache because even though you could play with Japanese audio, all the lip syncing was designed for the English audio, so nothing looked quite right. It's all fixed now though, so if you want to melt into the gorgeous samurai adventure goodness as intended, it's good to go. That's the end of our list, but do let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any more games that have a right way of playing them. I'd love to hear about it. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.